There's been a lot of debate in the Raptors fan base about whether or not this offseason has been a success, but what do NBA scouts think? Let's get into it. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Amateur Hour Sports, a YouTube channel that is dedicated to Toronto Raptors content and videos just like this, as well as live streams and shorts. So if you like what you see from today's video, then make sure you are subscribed to the channel, helping me on my road to 16,000 subs, and smash that like button to help get us some more recommended pages. And by the way, I'm over a week into my vacation in Greece, which means I recorded this video on October 5th. So anything that's happened between October 5th and the time this gets released, I'm not aware of it, so all I'm going with is the information that I have, but I sincerely doubt the front office is making any moves, or at least any significant moves in this time frame. So what we need to do today is go through the Raptors offseason so far and give our best determination of whether or not it was successful, because ESPN recently did a poll amongst 15 NBA scouts, and of those 15 NBA scouts, a third of them voted the Raptors as the team who had the very worst offseason in the entire NBA. And there was only 5 votes, as I said, but it's 5 out of 15 votes, which easily gives us the top spot in this poll, just above the Philadelphia 76ers for obvious reasons, with James Harden, who had 4 votes. So how could 15 NBA scouts, at least 5 of them, come to the conclusion here, and I get it's a small sample size, but how could they come to the conclusion that it was the Toronto Raptors, in fact, that had the very worst offseason in the league? Is that something that I'm going to agree with? Well, let's talk about what the Raptors have done with their offseason so far. Obviously, the start of the offseason was the NBA draft, where the Raptors selected Grady Dick with the 13th overall pick, and I think that Grady Dick was somebody I had projected to go in the top 10 of the draft. At the very highest, I thought he was going to go 11th to the Orlando Magic, but as it happened, the Toronto Raptors ended up with him at 13th overall, so was very happy to have him there, and it was a player who directly addressed one of the significant needs of the team going to the season. Last season, the Raptors struggled so mightily in the shooting department. They were one of the bottom teams in efficiency and attempts, so we were very happy to see Grady Dick come in and hopefully come in right away and very much alleviate a lot of the stress with that three-point percentage. But the bigger decisions and the bigger moves happened just a few days later when we got into July at the start of free agency. Now, it wasn't a very great start to the offseason for the Raptors, who lost Fred VanVleet for absolutely nothing as he signed for the Houston Rockets in free agency. The Raptors fought tooth and nail to try and keep Fred VanVleet, but ultimately the Houston Rockets had deeper pockets. They were willing to pay, and we got completely priced out of the negotiations. Now, on top of Fred VanVleet leaving, we did make some signings. We brought in players to the team. Jakob Poeltl returned to the team on a 4-year, $78 million contract. That was really nice value for Jakob Poeltl, and it was great to see we didn't lose him after sacrificing a first-round pick to get him a few months prior at the 2023 trade deadline. So great to see Jakob Poeltl return, and we followed that up with signing Dennis Schroeder to replace Fred VanVleet on a mid-level exception. A player of Dennis Schroeder's caliber on a mid-level exception. At the time, I was frustrated. Fred VanVleet walked away for free. I was frustrated with the front office, but I've come around to it a little bit more. A mid-level exception value for Dennis Schroeder is a solid contract for what is likely going to be the starting point guard for the Raptors this season. I haven't seen any of the preseason games. I don't know who's been starting, but I would imagine Dennis Schroeder is going to be a starting point guard. It remains to be seen for myself, but you can let me know in the comments whether or not he did start those preseason games. Dennis Schroeder, nonetheless, I expect to be the starting point guard in the regular season. And then the Raptors also followed this one up by making the signing of Jalen McDaniels on a biannual exception, $4.5 million a year or so. And a player of Jalen McDaniels' caliber, yeah, it's not moving the needle a ton with your roster, but for the value, it's solid. But for the Raptors, and why the Raptors are listed as the worst offseason, the lowest ranked offseason on this list, we need to go a little bit deeper into exactly why this could be the case. Because as far as personnel coming in, Jakob Poeltl was a good pickup. Grady Dick was a great pick in the draft. Jalen McDaniels for that value is solid. We also added in some interesting two-way players like Javon Freeman-Liberty, who was a standout in Summer League and had a really good G League season last year. And we also got Marquise Noel, a very low-risk, high-reward sort of play after his outstanding season with Kansas State. It's just that, yeah, he's like 5'7", 5'8". We don't know what he's going to be, but some decent signings. Hey, for those cheap, it's like almost free signings, some decent value over there for the Raptors. But the bigger question for Toronto is not just the player personnel here. Well, it is a little bit about player personnel, because Fred VanVleet walked out of the door for nothing. We did not get any value from him whatsoever after having the possibility of trading him at the 2023 trade deadline. And Masai Ujiri even took a little bit of the blame for that, at least owned up to it slightly with his comments at Raptors Media Day. But the one-to-one comparison of the player you replaced Fred VanVleet with is Dennis Schroeder. And unfortunately, objectively, Dennis Schroeder is the inferior player to Fred VanVleet. I've said it many times in this channel. Like, let's not kid ourselves here. Fred VanVleet is the superior player. If you want to make the argument that Dennis Schroeder is the better fit for this team and the rest of the Raptors roster is going to therefore be better as a result of Schroeder being here, and that's going to make the roster better, sure, you can make that case here that it's going to elevate his teammates, especially the ones in the starting five around him. But objectively, one-to-one comparison, Fred VanVleet is the superior player. Now, you also add in some other pieces to try and make up for the fact that he's lost, as I mentioned, those 2 point guards and two-way contracts. But ultimately, as far as the roster is concerned, it feels like there is a slight downgrade here, but not enough to suggest it's been the worst offseason in the league. But it's not necessarily about what the Raptors have done with their offseason that has caused this vote here. It's about what the Raptors haven't done in their offseason. The biggest things that needed to be addressed in the offseason, I would say there's 3 things that we needed to see addressed in the offseason by the Raptors and things that we wanted to see done in the offseason by the Raptors. First of all, we wanted a good draft selection that directly helped out with one of the key needs for this team. Secondly, we wanted to see an actual direction having been chosen by the front office. Give us a vision, give us some sort of sense of direction of where this team is heading. We want to see the vision of where this team is going. We don't want to hear Masai Ujiri say it at Media Day. We want to see the vision of where this team is going, and we want to see a vision that we can get behind and stand behind at the very least for the future. And third of all, we wanted to see the contract situation sorted out, the contract uncertainty within the team sorted out so we have more security with the future and, again, of what we want this team to be. So the first thing, we wanted a draft pick that directly associated with one of the needs of the team, and hey, we checked that box. We did that, as I mentioned, by bringing in Grady Dick. But as far as the other 2 major ones are concerned, they were not addressed in the slightest. In fact, it may have gotten even worse. First of all, we wanted to see a vision for this team. We wanted to see a direction for this team. And honestly, we came into the offseason with so many questions about what we want this team to be. And I think we're about to exit the offseason with even more questions because, yes, Masai Ujiri said that he wants his team to be competitive, but he also spent the first part of the offseason shopping Pascal Siakam unsuccessfully, and the second part of the offseason with the opportunity to make a trade for Damian Lillard, but ultimately deciding not to really go all in on the trade. Even though at Media Day he said they were aggressive, and Bobby Webster has confirmed they were aggressive in trying to get Dame, they weren't really aggressive though, because all they really wanted to offer was Gary Trent Jr. and those 2 first-round picks. Not OG Anunoby, who is on an expiring contract, and this leads us into the third thing that very much was not addressed. Like, how can we go into an offseason where 3 key players are 1 year away from becoming free agents, and Gary Trent Jr., Pascal Siakam, and OG Anunoby? How can we go into an offseason with all 3 of these players on expiring deals and then not addressing a single one? So we have this additional uncertainty about the direction of this team. What does this team want to be? You say it wants to be competitive, but on paper, it doesn't look like a super competitive team to me, and the Raptors fan base that we have here would suggest that it's likely a 7th or 8th place team, not where you want to be. A play-in tournament team with a likely round 1 date against either the Boston Celtics or Milwaukee Bucks. Yeah, very much not where you want to be. So we want to have some sort of assurance for the future at the very least, because we're not as confident this season, and we don't even have that. Gary Trent Jr. is set to become a free agent. I think a deal can get done, but there's still uncertainty there that hasn't been addressed in the offseason. Pascal Siakam, I expect to stay, but again, we don't have that security and certainty. And OG Anunoby, I expect OG to leave. So we now have one of the more valuable players in the NBA potentially walking out the door for completely nothing, and that is the sad reality of what the offseason was. The roster and the moves that we did make, what we did do in the offseason, it was unfortunate for everybody leaving in the offseason. If we're counting just this offseason, it's unfortunate. If you count, the possibility of getting value from previously, it was a mistake. Masai Ujiri owned up to it, but the roster moves, they were okay. Not the worst in the NBA, but what made it the worst offseason in the NBA potentially is what we didn't do and the core needs of this team that were not addressed. If you ask me, you could maybe say the Sixers are the worst offseason because the Harden situation might set them back mightily, but it remains to be seen the ramifications of the decisions the Raptors front office made in this offseason. It remains to be seen the ramifications that it will have on this organization going forward, and especially in 1 year's time when potentially 3 key players become free agents. So what do you make of this Raptors offseason? Is it as bad as these NBA scouts are making out to be? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below, because that is it for me for today. Drop a like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to Amateur Sports for more content like this, and I'll see you again very soon for another video.